Jesse, Tony, hey, congratulations on your new documentary, War Game.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I guess we have to ask first is how did this project actually came about for the both of you?
Well, it started with an op-ed in the Washington Post. Three retired generals said, we need to look at this potential threat. And Vet Voice, a nonpartisan veterans organization, took up that challenge to say, we have in our network people who have served in government who can help us wargame the next insurrection in which the military fragments. And I, with my ear to the ground, found out about this exercise. And I said, what an extraordinary thing to do to think about our political future. The fact that there were people from 5 different presidential administrations coming together was really interesting to me, that we don't see that kind of space much in American life where people of different parties actually work towards a common purpose. And I thought this is like I don't know, shades of Dr. Strangelove. This is like, oh, live theater. This is fascinating. Tony and I made a film about a war game scenario that the U.S. Army runs. So we're super interested in this kind of space. And we reached out and talked to Vet Voice, and they were willing to give us access. And we were off to the races and had to figure out how to raise the money and then make the film. But I think they shared our vision that there could be an important conversation in war game.
So this project wasn't like a government sanctioned project, and it wasn't in secrecy or anything like that.
There was some secrecy around it because so much of what is going on today, and so much that threatens to uproot democracy, is perception, right? And conspiracy theory has been weaponized. So there's some concern when you stage a war game like this that conspiracy theorists will say it's the work of the deep state, it's propaganda. So the fact that Vet Voice welcomed in a film crew was, for them, advantageous, because we're non-partial. We are documenting, we are witnessing, we are not writing scenarios, we are not telling the role players what to do. So we, in some sense, were represented a kind of openness, right, to the process. But the process was, by and large, kept under control and under wraps. Vet Voice was driving toward a report, which it's a 100-page report that they shared with the Pentagon and with the White House. But in many ways, the film is going to be much more effective than a 100-page report, because it engages people not just in their minds, but also in their hearts. And so that I think was a really valuable collaboration for them and for us.
So in production-wise, how did you become a fly on the wall during those 6 hours and not interrupt their exercise?
Yeah, well, when we both of us have a lifetime of experience as documentary filmmakers, I think we're sensitive to wanting to be present and capture life unfolding in a very cinematic way. This was a political thriller, so we built an exceptional team of about 80 people. We were able to build a set that replicates in a theatrical way the White House Situation Room. And I think that was a conversation with the Vet Voice. They felt that if we could do that, it would really elevate the intensity level of the role players' participation in this exercise. We didn't want to do anything that would interfere, to your point. And so we hired 4 of the world's best documentary cinematographers to move around the room and capture that action. And we had a remarkable degree of control, though, in a way, which typically in a lot of documentary work, you really don't have. You're running around, you're shooting over 18 months or 2 years, and you're sort of reactive, and we could be a little more proactive in capturing the action. And I think that when the role players stepped into that space, they immediately sort of forgot about us and were focused on the decision that they had to wrestle with, and this crisis, this potential civil war, this fracture in the U.S. military. And that is often the case, I find, as long as you sort of, it's not fly on the wall. I don't like that phrase. I think you're sort of much more present, and people don't really ever forget that there's a camera there. But I think they had much more important business, frankly. And many of them are public servants. One of them ran for president. They're senators, so in a way they're used to attention, and they are very much themselves.
Wow. And I was watching this, and it didn't feel like a documentary, is because of the way how you guys actually told your story. Tell us about crafting it into I don't want to call it narrative storytelling, because this actually happened and unfolded in our eyes.
Yeah, I think one of the things that got Jesse and I extremely excited about this was the cinematic potential of it, right? In early cuts, we found that we did too good a job at creating this cinematic reality. People would watch it and assume they were looking at actors who were reading lines from a script. That's how good these role players are, right? But there is no script, and they are not actors, right? And so, the potential to do something that's fake, but then becomes real, which is really theatrical alchemy. That's what happens when folks go into a theater. They know that the actors on stage are not real, but through the course of a well-written script and through catharsis and through empathy for characters, the audience gives themselves over and buys into the reality. So I've been told by folks that this is a nightmare ride. I mean, that the tension is, edge of your seat. And that was a goal for us, but not just in that we wanted to scare people. We want to also move people. We want to provoke people to think. We want to provoke people to have conversations. And I think to that end, it's been a success.
Isn't your film kind of scary on its timing too? Because the fact of this could potentially happen, or it's not even the United States. It almost happened in France, and I think it's unfolding right now in Venezuela.
Yeah, well, there have been a number of coups, military-backed coups, in the lifespan of making this film. This is not a theoretical proposition. I think we recognize that. We've lived through January 6, 2021. We saw an armed insurrection at the US Capitol, an attempt to subvert democracy. I think it's incumbent upon all of us to really think about what could happen next. The military is an institution that we take for granted, but it really is the bulwark of our democracy. There is a small segment of the military that you could call extremist. And I think that we know that in a contested election, which we're likely to have, the military, as they played in 2021, will play a crucial role in ensuring that we have a peaceful transfer of power. So let's think about those questions. Let's invite audiences to sit at the White House Situation Room table and maybe think for themselves what decision they would make. Would they invoke the Insurrection Act and deploy active duty US military on domestic soil? That's a kind of taboo, but we think it's good government. It's a stress test. And I think it's also a hopeful film. I mean, there's a darkness here. I think we're all staring into the abyss, but Tony and I came away really inspired by the people we met, the stories they have to tell about what they've lived through. And I think that we're all reckoning with the trauma of January 6, 2021. And this is a way to kind of process that and be proactive about, being prepared for what comes next.
Well, it's excellent. Well, let me wrap it up with one last question here. As audiences have a chance to watch War Game, what is the one most important lesson you hope they walk away with?
Interesting. That democracy is not a given, right? And normalcy bias, which is this idea that because the ship of state has always righted itself, it always will. That's not true. That's an assumption. And that the bulwark of democracy in many ways are a gentleman's agreement, right? And so we all have to agree that there's certain elements that make democracy that we have to protect, that we all have to be on board for. That's the big takeaway for me. And one last thing is this idea of what is a patriot? Interestingly for me, our film reclaims that term, which has been so co-opted, right? I mean, these days you hear that the January 6 insurrectionists who are being held in prison are patriots, that they're political prisoners, right? And so there's a real battle over the meaning of this word. And I think audiences, after they see War Game, will walk out of the theater having a redefined sense of what it means to be a patriot.
Well said. Well said. Jesse, Tony, thank you very much for speaking to us about War Game, and let's hope this doesn't come true. So thank you very much.
Thanks,
Thank
Kate.
you.